For centuries, one city controlled the flow of wealth between East and West. It wasn't built on fertile farmland, rich gold mines, or vast armies. It rose from a cluster of muddy islands, where survival itself seemed impossible. Yet from that unlikely refuge emerged a republic that dominated Mediterranean trade, pioneered industrial-scale shipbuilding centuries before the Industrial Revolution, and became one of the wealthiest commercial powers in history. This is the story of how Venice turned geography, engineering, and trade into an empire. At its absolute peak, a single medieval shipyard could launch a fully assembled warship in exactly one day. That level of industrial output usually requires vast farmland, deep mineral veins, and a massive population. This state had none of those. Instead, its founders were refugees with nowhere else to go. They settled on a cluster of muddy malarial islands in a lagoon at the edge of the Adriatic Sea. The shallow, shifting waters made the islands terrible real estate, but they also made them incredibly difficult for land-based armies to reach. While neighboring cities dealt with constant invasions, these settlers were protected by the simple fact that nobody wanted to fight a war in a swamp. With no natural resources to extract and no fields to plant, the earliest Venetians turned to the sea. They survived by moving goods along the coast, building an entire civilization around controlling the flow of trade rather than harvesting the land beneath them. The decisive turning point came in 1082. The Byzantine Empire needed naval protection, paying for it with sweeping tax exemptions. While competitors paid heavy tariffs, Venetians traded tax-free. This structural edge let them undercut everyone, walk away with massive profits, and steadily accumulate capital. Those profits didn't sit idle. The merchant families poured that wealth straight into a sprawling state-owned industrial complex designed to scale their trade dominance, the arsenal. Looking at the schematic of the arsenal reveals a 24-hectare walled complex operating centuries before the Industrial Revolution. Workers manufactured standardized parts separately, assembling galleys on an assembly line that could replace a lost fleet faster than any rival. The Byzantine tax break provided the cash, but the arsenal was the engine. It allowed Venice to project permanent physical control across the Mediterranean. With its industrial advantage firmly established, Venice found an even greater opportunity. When the Crusades began, most of Europe saw a holy war. Venice saw an enormous logistics contract. Transporting soldiers and horses to the Middle East meant moving massive amounts of cargo, and they charged a premium to do it. In 1202, an underfunded Crusader army arrived in the lagoon without enough money to pay for their transport. Under the guidance of Doge Enrico Dandolo, Venice offered an alternative arrangement, redirecting the army's firepower to settle some of the Republic's outstanding debts. That redirection ended with the catastrophic sack of Constantinople. Venice turned an army of religious zealots against their own Byzantine benefactors, securing permanent physical monopolies in the east and dragging treasures like these bronze horses back to the lagoon. Managing an empire this sprawling required immense internal discipline. Unlike most of Europe, Venice had no kings, no royal dynasties, no succession crises. It was a republic governed by a broad coalition of merchant families whose primary shared interest was steady profit. That political stability became one of Venice's greatest competitive advantages. It created reliable legal contracts. Foreign merchants trusted Venetian courts, allowing the city to pioneer advanced financial tools like maritime insurance and pooled risk investments. By combining ruthless expansion abroad with predictable, stable laws at home, Venice positioned itself as the ultimate unavoidable middleman for European commerce. This map tracks the spice trade at the height of Venetian power in the 1400s. Notice how every land and sea route from Asia ends up funneling directly through the Republic before reaching European markets. If you wanted pepper or nutmeg, you paid the Venetian toll. For centuries, that system generated extraordinary wealth. But a business model built on controlling a single geographic choke point carries an unavoidable weakness. It only works until someone discovers a better route. Rival European powers were growing exhausted by the extreme markups and began aggressively searching for ways to bypass the Mediterranean altogether. The fatal blow arrived when Portuguese navigators finally charted a new, direct water route around the southern tip of Africa, reaching India entirely by sea. The economic logic was brutal and immediate. By sailing directly to the source, merchants cut out the entire chain of Islamic middlemen and Venetian trading houses. The geography that Venice had ruthlessly engineered for centuries was suddenly irrelevant. The Republic didn't collapse overnight. Instead, it entered a long twilight, masking its commercial decline by redirecting centuries of accumulated wealth into opulent art, architecture, and massive civic displays. The story of Venice reveals a timeless lesson about wealth. Geography can create extraordinary opportunity, engineering can multiply it, and smart institutions can protect it for centuries. But no monopoly lasts forever. The moment a cheaper, faster, or more efficient route appears, even the world's greatest commercial empire can begin to fade. The canals, palaces, and monuments that still define Venice today are more than beautiful reminders of a glorious past. They are the enduring legacy of a republic that mastered global trade centuries before the modern world understood the power of supply chains, logistics, and industrial production. Venice's story is about far more than ships or spices. It proves that lasting wealth isn't always built on natural resources. Sometimes it comes from controlling the movement of goods, investing in innovation, and creating institutions that others trust. But history also reminds us that no economic advantage is permanent. Every monopoly eventually faces a new technology, a new route, or a new competitor capable of changing the rules forever. If you enjoyed this documentary, don't forget to like, comment, share, and subscribe. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next documentary.